So I went to go see Kung Fu Panda 4 a couple days ago, and yeah, I wasn't blown away by it. The plot heats were too similar to Kung Fu Panda 3. The characters that I love from the franchise are absent or reduced to a small portion of the movie's runtime, and it wasn't as funny or enthralling as the first two or even the third. However, I didn't hate it. It still had good emotional moments, likable characters, and a few chuckle-worthy moments. It was overall pretty good, and doesn't deserve nearly the amount of hate it's getting right now, even though I didn't mind Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate. Yeah, I said it. I can at least understand why people absolutely detest it. But Kung Fu Panda? Yeah, I think people are going overboard on it. So today I wanted to talk about why Kung Fu Panda 4 is good but not great. So starting off with the plot of the movie, now the story is basically Po moving in the ranks of Kung Fu only instead of teacher. It's spiritual leader of the Valley of Peace, and he has to also find a new dragon warrior to take his place, so he can focus on giving the Valley of Peace guidance and wisdom. Like I said, this feels like the exact line as the third movie, where Po has to move on from his dragon warrior status in order to move on in his journey. The reason why this feels like a rehash is because of the way it's structured, and because of that it feels like we've been there and done that. Now I will say it does make sense that this is the next step for Po to take as a Kung Fu master, because in the third one Oogway did make it clear to Po that he was his successor, and he gave him the staff for a reason, so while it does feel rehashed, I think this was the best way for it to go. As for the characters that we see in the movie, spoiler alert, the Furious Five are nowhere to be seen. Throughout the duration of the movie they are on Kung Fu missions. We do see Shifu though, and this is the character that got reduced in terms of relevance to the story. He mostly just serves to give exposition to Po about his responsibilities to the Valley, or he's just there to be used for a gag. As for Ping and Li Po's dads, they were pretty enjoyable. I liked their dynamic as CO dads WHO just want their son to be safe, and I also like their friendship that grows throughout the movie. It's very charming and endearing. As for the new characters like Zhen, let me tell you, everyone is wrong about her. She is the best part of this movie. She's energetic, charismatic, clever, and extremely likable. I don't know what people were talking about with this character. She fucking rocks, and Aquafina did a fantastic job bringing her to life. As for the villain, the Chameleon, I both like and dislike her. On the one hand, her abilities are pretty cool, and Viola Davis gives her a cold, slimy voice to go along with this character. But her motivations are pretty lackluster, although I do think it is plausible that this is a legit thing that could happen. Let me explain. In the movie, the city they go to, they had never even heard of the Dragon Warrior, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of Kung Fu warriors there, considering they've got the artillery tank of a police force patrolling there. So it's most likely Kung Fu isn't as big there, and that particular dojo is the one that turned her away, and they don't accept small creatures into their Kung Fu dojo, whereas a place like the Valley of Peace would. Or maybe over time they learned that size doesn't matter in Kung Fu, and started letting characters like Mantis learn Kung Fu as well. Just my theory. But the motivation is still weak. And outside of the final battle, she doesn't really do a lot of villainous things. She just waits for the characters to show up to progress with her plan. But while I do think she is a pretty weak villain, I still think she is a better villain than Kai in the third movie. As much as Kai was more intimidating as a villain, his motivations were weak. He only wanted the Kai to gain power. That's it. There wasn't any particular reason other than him wanting power. The Chameleon has pretty weak motivations, but at least they're legit motivations, and not just wanting power. She's nowhere near as good as Tai Lung or Lord Shen, but she is a good enough villain. As for Po, he's still his usual lovable, hilarious self. He still adds a lot of energy and charisma to the movie and is mostly responsible for the chuck-worthy moments, as well as still being a badass Kung Fu warrior. He also develops a very sweet, endearing friendship with Zhen. They both bond over being orphans, and both bring the most heartfelt emotional moments of the movie. As for the characters like Tai Lung WHO were promised in the trailer, he doesn't have a lot to do in the film. He mostly appears in the beginning parts of the climax, and gets his butt handed to him pretty quickly by the Chameleon, as well as giving Po some harsh comments about failing Oogway as well as the Valley of Peace. But I will say it was good to hear Ian McShane's voice again. The other villains like Shen and Kai don't get as much as a line in this movie and mostly just serve as fan service. But I will say, I'm glad that they didn't use them for the entirety of the film, because that would take away from the Chameleon's presence as a villain. So overall guys, I do like Kung Fu Panda 4. It's not as good as the first three, but it's a bit terrible. It's really amazing that the fourth movie only took a slight dip in quality compared to the third one instead of a huge dive into shit like so many other franchises. It really speaks to the quality and brilliance of this franchise, and I'm very glad it's doing good at the box office. And even though I do think it's the weakest of the four, I'm still glad they made it, and since IT sets up more movies, this gives them the chance to do a better job with 5 and 6. I think it's honestly not fair to compare this to the first 3, because it's the start of a new trilogy, and it's going to start off a little slow. That's how IT always goes when starting a new trilogy. I'm honestly glad that out of all the franchises that could still be going years after their supposed conclusion, Kung Fu Panda is one of them, and while the awesomeness is not as strong as IT was back in 2008 and 2011, IT was still awesome enough to keep my interest. But anyways guys, what do you think of Kung Fu Panda 4? Do you like it or dislike it? Let me know DKWN in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.